let me set the scene for you. Let me get us teed up as to what we're even talking about. So, we have a real issue, which is foreign policy as like a concept is really gatekeepy. It's not an open world where like anyone gets to just study it. It's considered an area where you have to do 4 years of schooling minimum, and then you're considered like minimally helpful at some mid-level think tank that doesn't matter, and then you can make like 50K a year for the rest of your life and die with unending student loan debt. My goal here is to give you my education for free. And unfortunately, though, I have 4 years of education, formal in this space, and then about like 6 extra months of graduate school before I just kind of didn't have the energy for it anymore. It was COVID, blah, blah, blah. And now, uh, I've realized that there's a lot of great things I've learned from studying and learning foreign policy that are like actually practical to your real life that like you can actually use. And it's complicated though, and also everyone that teaches it is, and this is true, boring. Because their whole lives are spent in academia. Most professors actually are researchers first and foremost. You don't become the head of a like international affairs department. You don't become the chair of that department by being a great lecturer or being a great educator. You get there by being a great publisher, a great researcher. And that's not to say that they're all bad, but I think the aggregate person is not able to reach a broad audience, and at the same time, they have interesting and compelling things to teach about the world. Just straight up, no fat, no asterisk to that. So, we are on the beginning of learning everything about this space, like how to be how to think foreign policy, policy hyphen foreign. So, to get us there, we are gonna start with what the G dang heck what the fuck is foreign policy? Like, let's just not even, we don't gotta be too formal here. This isn't, I don't need to be buttoned up. I don't care. What is foreign policy even? Who is she and why do we care? And I made PowerPoint. So you can thank me later. I just felt like I needed that. I want credit. Okay. So, let us get kicking here. So, why even listen to me? Well, I used to make money doing theory in foreign policy. Um, I supported and made a lot of visualizations and a lot of structures for big reports that went to organizations like the UN, and some of its subsidiaries, like the development program in Ukraine and in Uganda. Some of my work helped foreign affairs, some of it helped NATO. So I have a lot of experience in like the practical research side of this, and was responsible for teaching kiddos, 18-year-olds, basically illiterate people, how to actually like be introduced to like the data side of foreign policy. 'Cause this might surprise you, but there actually is like a data component to this. But we're not going to talk about that right now. Before I was doing my professional work, I actually went to a awesome foreign policy school. Went to University of Denver. It's one of the best foreign policy programs outside of Washington, D.C., which I met some great people. I've had instructors that were literal, like, former military, like, 5-star, or 4-star, sorry, 4-star generals who oversaw, like, major operations for the United States, and also had the wonderful experience of getting to, like, meet and interact with and learn from people like Condoleezza Rice and Madeleine Albright. Like, that was and so I think I've been around the block a little bit, you know. I've had my fill and have been exposed to some really good ideas. And not to brag, but I also twice went to different graduate schools for additional foreign policy and public policy education. Uh, the first one was like for a week or two. I was at University of Covidago online. It was University of Chicago's public policy program while it was COVID, and I decided that was the worst use of $120,000 I could have possibly thought of. Just carte blanche, that was where my head was at. And the second one is I was on a full ride through a fellowship at the University of Denver. Basically, it was conditional on me working full time at one of their research institutes, and in exchange, they would pay me, yeah, some money, not good money, but it was some, and I would then get all of my coursework for a master's degree paid for. I then left that job because I realized I actually don't like being locked away in a cubicle making charts all day. That's not my dream. My dream is to help people learn cool, new, interesting things about the world. So that's why we're here. And this is most important. I've gotten my head knocked around quite a few times now from rugby, and the CTE has not set in yet. But I know I am running out of time before I can't read good no more. So we gotta we gotta make sure that you all are getting the information that I have in my head before it's too late. And then finally, I wanna save you money. I want you to get my foreign policy education for free because it's knowledge that just should exist in the world. It should be something accessible and available and interactive and fun, and you deserve it just because it is information that exists, and I want to get that gate that exists that keeps. I want to take that gate that is you of what like assuming you get no scholarships, $240,000 minimum for like a mid-tier private school. I want to take that gate and just remove it because you are deserving to be an informed citizen of the world and not have that be conditional on whether or not you have $240,000 lying around. Does that mean you're getting less, I don't know, structure? Sure. But the knowledge is knowledge, and this will then exist forever. So you should listen to me honestly, because I ain't charging you anything. Like, you, if you want, you can give me a follow, give me a subscribe, all that good stuff. But I ain't gonna be charged. I am not gonna be like paywalling any of this from what I can see right now. Okay. So why honestly, like, we now need to talk about the important thing. Like, the most important question when we enter any new topic. The question that matters. Why learn new stuff? Because I feel like foreign policy can have a little bit of a when am I going to use calculus in my life energy? When am I ever gonna need to figure out the rate of change of a water hose removing oil from a pump, whatever? Why give a shit? Why, who the fuck cares? Um, One, I think it is awesome to just learn new things about the world. Why not? Why not learn a new thing? Um, because you never know where it will connect to some other aspect of your life that you do care about. And the fact that we can't know that, I actually think is awesome rather than a problem to solve. I don't know what compels someone to learn this. I don't know why I bothered to learn about this space. I do know that I have really enjoyed the way it's changed how I think about the world. So, the other part is there actually are some practical applications. Kind of like calculus, there's actually ways we can use this stuff in our real lives to like learn and do cool new things. So, I'll be honest, I dungeon master every once in a while. I use this stuff to make D&D like to help with D&D. It's how I start thinking about like why countries are doing what they do around the players because honestly like most plot for players will be driven by states, nations, the world they're in, and the world will have countries of different types, sophistication, lore, history. And so if you like D&D, why not learn about this stuff? Why not take this with you? Stop making the Empire, whose only job is war for war. Like, just actually do something fun, you know? Okay. Also, let's assume you want to tell interesting stories. You want to do that. It's awesome when we can pull other aspects of the world into our stories, into our books, into our writing, into narrative, because again, just like players in a D&D campaign exist within a world that is made up of countries almost always, characters you write for stories, for jokes, for narratives, your life that you tell in a story is going to be affected by the country you're in. I don't think you can have a complete biographical telling of your own life without the context of the country you live in and why it does what it does. So, learn this to honestly just understand yourself. Um, then more like granularly writing. All good writing has people in a place at a time, and that place and time will have something around them, unless they live in Ooga Booga pre-nation caveman or some like post nation world where like we are beyond the concept of nations, to which I don't think that's even possible. I think even if we were to be like borders are fake and imaginary and no nation, guess what, there's still a nation of like the planet, a nation of the world that's managing and regulating this baby. So there we go. There will always be a nation no matter how sci-fi the scenario. And if you're writing Ooga Booga No Country, I guess pop off, have fun with that. And then finally, and this is maybe my most like, I'm gonna say gay opinion, you can be a good citizen by knowing this stuff. And being a good citizen of the world matters. Like, I think it's hard to believe that sometimes. My life experience has been sometimes actually like it doesn't, why just give up. Just give up. Who cares? Genuinely, I do want to believe that it matters that we be a good citizen. Okay, so we're now gonna tee up foreign policy theory as like a concept, like the broad concept. Basically, it answers one question. There's one question we are always looking to answer when it comes to foreign policy theory. One question. I want you, if you're watching the video version of this, to think what is probably the one question that if we were to answer, it would like answer everything else about all of how nations work. Okay? You have your answer in your head. Awesome. Okay. Truck honked and it had its answer. The answer is why war? If we can answer one question, why war, we then will be able to understand everything else about countries. Everything about countries. Because war is, this is true, kind of dumb in a vacuum. Like, in just like, oh, we just did war for war's sake. That's stupid. Because I have country, there's country here, and now there's country here, and now countries war. One country might get something from the other, but both countries will be damaged afterwards. People will be hurt, infrastructure destroyed, psyches altered. There will be loss. Arguably, the aggregate value of the world, of like resources, wellness, happiness, joy, that will all be less after the war, regardless of who won and how quick. Arguably, like, things will be worse in the world when war done. When war done. So, why do war? Why do we have war? That it seems like a bad thing to do. And that's where we get all the questions. So that's where we get all the other questions that come from this one thing. On, oh god, gotta fix how like oversaturated this is. Oh my, this looks so. Oh god, I'm such a boomer. I'm such a boomer. We got that. Okay, we got this. We're gonna there. Okay. All right, we fixed it. Perfect. That's, there we go. Okay, I think now this looks way less blown out. Perfect. Okay, back on topic. So, why all the other questions of the world, all the other questions of foreign policy, they come from that one root question. Like, why war branches us out into all the other questions we try to answer in foreign policy. So, how do economies work? Because knowing that could explain a lot about war. Why do people revolt? Because civil war and international war are different things, big if true. They are, you know, not the same thing. I hope that's not shocking information to anyone here. And so, like, why do people revolt against countries? What even, why do we do treaties? Like, because there's a compelling case to be made, and we'll talk more about this, of like, treaties are pointless. They are vibes-based things, so why do countries do them? How, what the fuck is a country? Like, actually. I'm not gonna, like, give the answer to this right now, but, like, just something for your brain to chew on. Like, on how that question is actually, like, unanswered. Because I'm gonna ask some questions that I think will probably leave us going, oh, okay, maybe, like, maybe you have your answer, but you can understand why maybe we don't have the answer. Is Palestine a country? Does Ukraine own Crimea? Is Kashmir a country? For those, that one might be a little niche for everyone here. Kashmir is a region in between that's like wedged between China, uh, India, and Pakistan. And it has just kind of, there are people that live there that understand themselves as Kashmiri who are like fully wanting an autonomous sovereign nation, and some of them even do think of themselves as that. And India, Pakistan, and China each have just kind of claimed dibs on chunks of Kashmir and said like, "Yep, that's something we own now. You aren't a country, you dum-dums, you idiots. You don't own land," which is insane. That's wild. That is, imagine if that just, if you let you I live in Colorado. Imagine if someone just was like, "You actually are not Coloradan." Like Utah, Kansas, and Wyoming, the worst blunt rotation of states imaginable, just went, "Yeah, we actually own you now. You're just chunks of us. You have become a part of us. You aren't what you claim to be." You would be rightly confused as to how come that happened. But it has. Like, Kashmiri people can, as much as they want, claim to be sovereign, independent people, and they are in spirit, but they aren't practically. They are owned by other countries, which is interesting. How does that happen? And I'm just gonna now say, because this is a really important humility thing we all need to have here. So I'm also gonna exercise humility here. If you think you have the answer, not a answer, but the answer to any of those questions I posited above, I have a Nobel Prize that I will nominate you for. It's really important that we recognize we are in this space learning a new thing that is different, that is unique, that doesn't have ready-made answers. And yes, there are answers that we can feel comfortable with and confident on, but just try your best to be like, "Okay, maybe I don't know everything. I don't know everything. I have my own strong thoughts on like general answers to a lot of these questions, but I think that those are still informed by my perspective and what I know and also what I don't know. And I don't know what I'll know. Big if true. Big if true, you can't know what you don't know. So just be open in all of this. And I promise to not beat you over the head with my answer to all these questions too hard. Until like we're at the opinion section of this. Okay, so we gotta talk about the actual theories now, because all of these theories seek to answer let's go back. All theories seek to answer the why war and then all the millions of questions that why war creates after. So, we gotta talk about the first one, and it's the one you probably were like accidentally exposed to the most, especially if you took like, I don't know, like AP European history. It's one that comes up. Realism, or its prototypical version, like its early, freshly born infant, the prepubescent version. You may have heard the term realpolitik or realistic politics. um the theory of realism is like probably the one you might have the most exposure to, which is nice because it makes it the easiest one for us to start with. So, in one sentence, nations want more power and will value it above all else. They'll value getting power above all else. So, like, I have nation A and nation B, and nation A has 100 power. Its power level is 100. and it sees Nation B has a power level of 50, and it's going like, okay, like if there's many, I don't want many more buffs going on right now. I don't want any more buffs for that country. It's concerning me that it has the power it has right now. All right, well, it's time to then be worried about how to keep that from happening. How do we nerf that country? Basically, we have two ways to think about all countries in the world. I can either buff myself to keep that other country from being better than me, or I can nerf them. I can make them feed me. I can take them. I can turn them into gold from farming. Okay? So how that is what in the realism theory of the world, all nations are really like degenerate MOBA players who are wanting to snowball harder than the person in their lane. And all of the other people on the other team later on in the game, right? So that is a good way to think about, like, as a metaphor, what is a realism based structure. So, really important follow-up question though is why do they think this way? What compels them to say that's like the answer to it all? Well, first, we live in a godless universe who that is cruel and where life is nasty, brutish, and short. No one is coming to save you. You are going to die. And when you die, it will be blank. It's just nothing. This is the joyous and happy vision of the world that realists have constructed. They do not think that there is a daddy above us that will be able to take his belt off and get us back in order. You, we have to make safety ourselves. Daddy's not coming. And the way that's described in foreign policy is anarchy, an anarchic global system. When we think daddy isn't going to come to save you, it means we live in anarchy. Um, and I think that's beautiful, really, the peachy way they describe that. And to elaborate on what it means for there to be no one to save you, if going back to our nation A, nation B, nation A is saying like, okay, I've tried to buff my power level and I only got 5. I'm at 105. Nation B, though, is still buffing itself, and it's now at 75. At the rate we're going, Nation B will be bigger than me soon. And there's no super nation that's above both of us that's like in charge of keeping the peace. There is no one if Nation B gets stronger than me, the only thing to stop it from attacking me is its own restraint. And that's unsafe. I don't trust that. So, I have to be daddy. I must be daddy because they will become daddy if I let them become daddy. And that means belts coming off, and now war. War. Yes, it's going to destroy some of my economy, some of theirs, damage people, hurt things, blah, blah, blah. But we got to nerf them now. And we're stronger than them. So that means we will eventually win. At least enough to make it so they were nerfed at a greater degree than we were nerfed. And so my power level relative to them, like maybe I'm 105, they're 75 now. We go to war and I lose 20 and they lose 30. And that'll happen because we can do more to them, inflict more on them, bomb them more. Yeah, we lost 20, but they lost 30. That means we bought time. We saved ourselves. Because again, the the only people wearing the belt, the only person that can be daddy is me. It's very sexual, the world they live in. To be clear, they do not describe things in terms of daddy and belts. I wish they did though. Now, and so they live in constant fear. This is really important. They live in a state of constant fear and misery. Um, if they are worried that if they are less powerful than their neighbors will attack. You must be bigger than your neighbors, or you must have like some other deterrent that makes your power level bigger than your neighbors. Um, so it can be our military is tiny, pathetic, no ability to fight you, but we have nukes. We have nukes. So our power level instantly enters 1 million. And more importantly, even if our power level actually isn't that great with the nukes, even if you're way bigger than us and way stronger than us, you will lose way more than you will get nerfed from a nuke way harder than we will from a traditional invasion. And if we both nuke each other, we both get nerfed to 0. And neither of us want that. So you must be powerful in some way. And the other thing is realists have really high opinions of themselves. They really think that they are like above emotion. Your petty challenges and problems, your dumb human concerns, your quibbles on the ground, you are a fucking baby. Me though, I am daddy, who can discern when belt needs to come on and when belt needs to come off. And I trust me to do that. Nations and their leaders are rational actors, is something they think. Um, whether that's actually true, you run into the problem of arguably there's not actually ever been a realist in foreign policy ever. Um, because we aren't detached bodhisattvas who exist beyond material or beyond like emotional feelings about our material conditions. Arguably, no foreign leader has ever been that. They have had some personal goals, dreams, things they want. Um, and to give you an idea of how kind of not actually this has ever happened, probably, the most famous theorists are, and sorry, forgot to give a trigger warning, content warning, Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger picture came up. Um, Henry Kissinger is allegedly a realist. He claims himself to be one. He wrote a lot of books on it. His book Diplomacy really tries to have like a detached perspective. He really tries to be like, I'm above these things. I am above your petty concerns. Vietnam was a rational thing that we did. Cambodia, being bombed to the dust, was rational. Yes, we used many bomb and killed many people, but we thought we did the math, you see. And the math says we were going to win. Okay, cool, bro. Arguably, Henry Kissinger was just kind of a sociopath. This is where I'm now going to give my personal opinion. I don't think any realist theorist has ever happened, at least not in a pure sense. There are people that have tried really hard to be it and have like dreamed of doing it, and that's awesome for them. They probably haven't achieved it. So Henry Kissinger, and then the most famous one, especially if you took again AP like European history or like even probably like honors, you're like just a good high school European history class. You Realpolitik was a term you were exposed to, and Otto von Bismarck, the I think his title was Chancellor. I think his title was Chancellor. Ah. Probably should have written that one down. But he was in charge. He was daddy of Germany, leading up to World War One and through World War One. He coined the term realpolitik. He understood himself as a rational actor, and he said, like, I did World War One because when the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand happened, if we backed out of our allyship with Austria-Hungary, we would have entered a new world where we were a weak, tiny, pathetic country relative to the oh the oh I want to say the Allies. I know that's not it, but the French, Russian, British alliance. I can't believe I forgot the name. Just, it's not that important. My ego is just horrifically bruised. Um, but they were, he would say, like, yes, arguably, World War One was very risky, and probably we weren't gonna out nerf the other countries during it. But if we didn't back Austria-Hungary during it, our alliance would have fallen apart, and they would have likely been just absolutely obliterated by all of the factions that they were at war with. So we had to do it because it was basically their arithmetic was Alliance A's power level was slightly less than Alliance B's, and with a little luck and a little chutzpah, they could out nerf Alliance B enough to get through it. And there was arguably a lot, but arguably he also just kind of had additional loyalties and personal connections to the fact that Austria-Hungary was, and this is true, a largely Austrian country, which Austrians have a pretty strong cultural connection to Germany, and that may have and that very likely did influence a lot of what made his decisions during that war. So that's where you have him arguably still not being a fully rational actor, you know? Like, there's a lot of things that can define why he did what he did that is not best explained by flawless, irrational acting. Now, that's where the best example that realists would give, or not the best, but one that I think most realists would point to, would be World War One breaking out. World War One was Otto von Bismarck's pet project. If he didn't step in with Austria-Hungary, arguably World War One is a much more trivial affair. Like Austria-Hungary, especially now we know in hindsight, was gonna get its shit bucked in to the next county if Germany didn't do almost everything for them. Very funny and very true. Okay, now we got liberalism and neoliberalism. Okay, so liberalism and neoliberalism is I'm gonna say, more loaded ones, and I think one that we may have been exposed to a lot more in the 21st century. Like, you might have heard people being called like neoliberals, typically parentheses derogatory. That's a really common way that they're referred to. I am going to try my best through this, just like with realism, to to give it to you straight before I get too opiniony. Okay? Nations decide things based on collective values. I'd say that's a really good one sentence summary. So, my nation values democracy, freedom, justice, equality. Therefore, our decisions will be based on whether it moves those values forward in the world. Um, they will, that's at least like their understanding of the world. Why do they think that way? You might be asking. Well, democracies and free markets don't wage war. They sometimes get in kerfuffles. Sometimes they're involuntarily brought to war. But that's because the democracy and the free market country and its people said, God damn it, Europe has done it again. Europe has blown itself up and torn itself asunder, and now we have no choice but to get involved. Germany, how dare you? Um, they will say that, and they will point to that as evidence that a democracy generally holds the collective value of we don't like sending our people to war unless there's a really good reason. Because we are going to decide things together. Therefore, democracies tend to avoid war, tend to not get involved in war. Therefore, it must be that these more peaceful, friendly, loving nations that have chosen to be democracies make their decisions based on collective values. Neoliberalism then expands even more on like free markets and adds that like the freer the market, the lesser the war. Basically because uh if you're in a totally free market where country A and country B are at peace and deeply interconnect their trade, they will actually buff each other together, yes, maybe even causing them to change the power balance, but their economies will be so intertwined that the nerf inflicted from war will be so great, war no happen. Basically, peace through free markets, peace through free trade. No protectionism, no restriction on your internal industries and markets, because if you do that, you're going to increase the risk of war. Um, and they will say most wars seem to come from a conflict of values. We don't. Democracies enter war because someone is threatening the concept of democracy. Someone is threatening the very idea of freedom. Someone is threatening the very idea of like equality. Someone is threatening the very idea of free markets. That's why we need to go to war, is to protect those things. They especially gained more traction post World War II, for reasons that we will get to in a bit. We can save each other from war. Actually, we can't anarchy. We can construct daddy with each other. If we all collectively agree, like this is something neoliberals especially hold near and dear to their hearts. If we all collectively agree to make a super nation above us, a super daddy, if you will, super daddy can use his super belt to super stop us from super belting each other, or from regular belting each other. So if like all the democracies in the world agree to form a league, let's say like a league of nations, we can construct this league of nations to be Super Daddy, and Super Daddy will use his super belt when someone who's in or out of the league begins to try to belt another country. Um, you might be thinking, wait, but didn't that completely fail? And don't we have a lot of examples of actually like this has happened? This is where neoliberals do add one extra asterisk, which is we've actually never made the right organization, or at least many modern neoliberals will say we haven't made the right organizations with the right level of authority over democracy and free market enforcement. We need to make them stronger and bigger and more powerful institutions. Neoliberals like the idea of multinational organizations like the EU, the UN, historically the League of Nations, to be more and more powerful over their members, because that can be super daddy then. Um Arguably they're like maybe ish right, like the EU takes pretty significant authority from countries, from its member states, not a huge amount, but arguably kind of just factually a lot more than the UN does. And the UN has been a arguably a minor league baseball batting average on preventing war. Like, it does well in the triple A's, but every time it tries to go to the majors, you quickly realize that Russia and China can actually just kind of do whatever the fuck they want. The US can kind of do whatever the fuck it wants. There's nothing to stop them. So, but the EU has arguably done a pretty good job of preventing war. To my knowledge, there has not been a internal European Union war since the EU formed, which is that's good considering Europe's historical relationship with war. It arguably has done a pretty good job of removing some of the anarchy and also making that huge interdependence. So if I try to nerf you, if Germany today tries to nerf Poland now, they're so intertwined economically, socially, politically, that that's gonna blow up really bad. The most famous theorist of it, Woodrow Wilson. So Woodrow Wilson was the architect of the League of Nations, and arguably created the beginning framework of something really important. That's why I'm just going to talk about the examples right out the gate. He also created something called began the introduction of the thought of the idea of considering what would become known as the Bretton Woods Agreement. Basically, after World War II, the US pulled a bunch of countries by the petard to a little area called Bretton Woods, and kind of at gunpoint made a lot of countries agree that there will now be a World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, all these like institutions that, like, if you're to take it altruistically, in good faith, if you were trying to give them the best of intentions, they were trying really hard to make a more peaceful world by constructing international government organizations to manage these things. However, arguably, it was the US consolidating power and turning a bunch of stuff inward to it, because who actually gets to decide who's a criminal and not in the International Criminal Court? Who actually gets to decide whether trade agreements are fair? Who actually gets to decide who has and has not committed war crimes? So that's the less charitable explanation. Woodrow Wilson tried his real best with the League of Nations, and then kind of, I would say, the League of Nations began the planting of the idea that we can make better international government structure. And then we made Bretton Woods that kind of just became the US circle jerk, we get whatever we want thing. Uh, for further reading, see Neocolonialism. That'll give you more. Or you can go to the radical perspective. That'll also probably give you the most insight as to like how all of this works, as to like how, as like the best counterpoint to like neoliberalism. So the one sentence summary of the radicals: nations are a product of class interests and corporations. Oh, interesting. So, nations are a product of class interests and corporations. That is to say, they are basically capitalist institutions that make whatever it is that do whatever the capital owning class wants. The biggest, wealthiest corporations, they are the ones that get to set the rules of nations and what they do. Why do they think that way? Well, the capital owning class, the bourgeoisie, always wins. They always win. Who gets to go to the elite colleges? Who gets to be professors at universities? Who gets to write the books explaining what a good nation does? Who gets to donate the money to campaigns? Who gets, or if you're not in a democracy, who gets to fund the dictator's rise to power? Who is it that actually gives Vladimir Putin his money and backing to do what he does? Well, that would be the capital owning class, the bourgeois. They always get to decide it. They also are the ones that get to be the heads of nations because they get the education, the access, the money, the connections, blah blah blah. If think about the educational background of the median American president, you are basically looking at almost an endless list of Ivy Leagues or Ivy Plus universities. Every head of state in the world, to my knowledge, has some amount of formal education at a university, and that is difficult to do, just factually speaking. It requires commitment, time, money, and who has the most commitment to spend the time and the money? The bourgeois. So, and that's where they would then say the entire concept of a nation state, what nation states are, is inseparable from capitalism. Capitalism is the nation state. If there was not capitalism, we wouldn't really have nation states. Because nation states are a little more complicated than just emperor who kind of rules the area. Like Rome arguably wasn't that much of a nation state because like unless there was an active legionary army in the vicinity of your village, arguably most people in that village maybe thought of themselves as Roman, but still were like pretty sovereign of many laws. It took a long time for laws to even reach the some parts of the Roman Empire because you have to fucking send a person with a letter to declare it and then enforce it and all that. Yes, there was law and order, but arguably the Roman Empire was not that much of a nation state. The nation state really forms because big capitalist interests start saying, like, we are going to build centralized countries to regulate markets to make sure that they work in our favor, to protect our trade ships, to make sure that like when we want to send goods from New York to London, that waters are not just needlessly mined. We need a nation state to do that. Now, who's the most famous theorist? I'll let you take a guess in your head, and if you're watching the recording of this, just pause the video and think who the fuck it is that I'm probably talking about right now that created all of these ideas. Just ponder for but a moment. And if your answer was anyone other than Karl G. Dang motherfucking Marx, I don't know I don't know how to help you. This might be too far for you. Karl Marx arguably created. Now he didn't spend a huge amount of time, I would say, being like a foreign policy theorist. It's that many foreign policy theorists went, oh, like, come on, like Marx, we can see the logical end of your thoughts. That's Karl G. Dang motherfucking Marx is who we can attribute nearly all these thoughts to, and then also Frederick Engels would be the other, his co-writing partner. Okay, the best example of the radical theory, the Cold War, arguably the U.S. and then the USSR during the Cold War were totally bilaterally opposed to each other, basically on the idea that the USSR was, in theory, a country that had an anti-capitalist revolution and fully absolved itself of the concept of capital. Eh, it it had capital, it had class, it had rank. It arguably did it less and maybe different than the US. And that led to the Cold War because there was one country that was in the US, from the USSR's perspective, basically exclusively operating within the interest of class and power. And then there was another country, the USSR, that was allegedly operating on the idea of, we have left the concept of capital itself, we are free of its shackles, and now we are ready to be oh god, gotta fix the lighting here. There we go. There we go. That's better lighting. We arguably, the USSR then said we need to export the revolution. So the Cold War was arguably a product of the radical perspective on foreign policy, and the USSR being like, we can end war by ending capitalism. A post-capitalist world, a post-capitalist society would be objectively more free of war, of conflict, have more stable nation states than the current capitalist structure. That was their proposal. Okay. Now we have the constructivists. Constructivism. Their one sentence summary: states are literally just Santa Claus and can be whatever the fuck we want at any point. Basically, we have socially constructed the entire idea of a nation state. Nations are Santa Claus. We can, tomorrow, all agree we don't believe in, we can go, I don't believe in Santa Claus. I don't believe in Santa Claus. And you know what happens to Santa Claus if we say he doesn't exist? He doesn't exist. He just goes away. If we all just collectively agree states are not war-producing entities, they would just cease to be it, is basically the constructivist approach. They understand nations as products of our social constructions of what we want the nation to be. We project ourselves onto the nation. So why do they think that way? They would point to, honestly, genocide is objectively stupid. Like, objectively, if you remove all social construction, there is nothing, you can't do it if you don't have the social construction of race, of like ethnicity, if you don't have the social construction of gender, of sexuality, if you don't have these ways to construct our own image onto people and things and stuff and nations, there wouldn't be genocide. So obviously we do propose social constructions. To be straight up, if we don't have the idea, if we live in like some Earth, we live on Earth 1, right? We live on Earth 1 right now. And on Earth 1, we have the social construction of a like white person and the social construction of a black person. Yes, you can objectively observe a person and objectively see different shades, but all of the ways in which I think about the impact of that shade is a social construction. We can even say factually, like, it is melanin, and there are even genetic impacts from it, like prevalence of sickle cell disease. That can be totally true, and we can say that those are just facts that we acknowledge, but we socially construct so many more implications beyond just the literal facts of those attributes of a person, like melanin, prevalence of certain diseases, obesity, sickle cell, strength, speed, height, what have you. Yes, on Earth 1, we observe those things and we project that those things give me permission to think and do certain things to and about you. For Americans, arguably for many Americans still to this day, but objectively, up until 1865, the US held as a fundamental thing that, like, because you are black, you can be a slave. I can literally create the social construction of slavery, say that is something my nation values, and do basically a genocide and mass wealth and labor transfer from it. When in a world where we don't have social constructs, a mythical Earth Zero. Earth Zero, on Earth Zero, yes, we observe these attributes between us, melanin, certain genetic characteristics, what have you, but we don't think any thoughts about them. They're just things that are factually there. And we then go, yeah, and when we do sickle cell research, it's just like a thing we do that because it's a disease that happens to people, but I don't have the structure of race. I just know there are people that can get it and we should treat it. We don't think of it as there's a race of people that disproportionately benefit from that research. Um, so on Earth Zero, arguably, I'm not going to say 100% definitively, but I would really struggle to see how you could have like the concept of genocide, mass murder, mass enslavement if there's no social constructs that nations uphold, right? And that's where constructivists would say genocide is pretty objectively stupid because it blows up a huge chunk of your economy, it hurts a lot of people, it completely derails the social fabric of your nation, and yet we do it. Why? To enforce the social constructs of supremacy, of race, of ethnicity, of religion. Okay, I'm gonna pin that one. Religion arguably is and isn't a social construct depending on who you ask, but like I'm gonna say asterisk it depends. But without all those social constructs, you don't get genocide. Like if those were all gone, you don't have that. And then they would say that, all right, why do these social constructs happen? Why do we have social constructs occurring? Well, that's because elites get to run the state. Elites run, so they would kind of say the same thing as the radicals. Like, elites do define things, but while radicals go, elites gain power to enforce class structure. Constructivists go, no, elites gain power to enforce all the social structures that benefit them. Not just class, but race, religious, ethnic, even nationality as a concept. Like, we can remember, nations are Santa Claus. We could just all agree tomorrow there's no such thing as an American. It's just not a thing we do anymore. And there we go. And arguably, then, elites wouldn't run on platforms of enforcing the idea of American, of America. So that's a really, really big thing. And then states literally are like a new thing. They also kind of agree with the radicals in this regard of like, we've had social constructs for a long time, but arguably nation states didn't really become a thing until like the 1850s ish. And that is not because, though, of capitalism, although it's a capital as a social construct is something that plays a role. There's many social constructs we decided to start enforcing through a nation state. The most famous constructivist, Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault. You may know him from creating the idea of like the panopticon. He informed a lot of like Judith Butler's work on the way of thinking about gender as a social construct, and he informs for foreign policy theorists the idea that nations are social constructs. Nations are Santa Claus, and we can change it. Okay, the best example, the Treaty of Westphalia. The Treaty of Westphalia. Basically, after a big ass war in Europe. I can't believe I'm having a stroke right now. I'm gonna double check this because I don't want to spread misinformation. Hold on. Hold on. Sorry. I have absolutely failed here. Oh, I'm so sorry. The 30 Years' War. There we go. It was on the tip of my tongue. Is the lie I'm gonna say to save face. I did just kind of straight up forget it. The Treaty of Westphalia. After the 30 Years' War, basically nations began saying, like, I'm gonna take this now. I believe I own this. You own that. It was one of the first times we really, like, did a treaty that didn't say, like, I won, and now I get the things I conquered. Instead, it was like a negotiation of like, fine, you get this, I get that, because I want this community of people in my country, you want that community of people, we'll do that. It was we want Catholics in our country, we want Protestants in our country, we want to remove the Catholics, and we want it to be less egregious, all that. It was the nation states began to form at that time, and they began to enforce really the idea that like you weren't French in this like before the Treaty of Westphalia, a French person really was just kind of like a feudal peasant who lived under a lord, and the lord was like, I say you're French because I say I'm French, because there's a king that'll fucking cut my head off if I don't say I'm French. And that was it. It wasn't that there was like Santa Claus, it was king cut my head off. Treaty of Westphalia was like the first time we really had countries kind of exist and people went like, yeah, I'm French now, oui. Ah, I am now French. That is just something that happened. They just became that. Um, and they were okay with it. That doesn't mean like feudalism ended, that doesn't mean like kings ended, but it changed it from being a structure entirely out of like, I am French because if I say no, my lord will cut my head off, and my lord won't say no because the king will cut his head off, to instead it became like, I am French because I am in the French border. That was the shift that happened, which is cool. Isn't that lovely? We created Santa Claus. The Treaty of Westphalia was the first time we went like, I do believe in Santa. I do believe in Santa. And it started to like actually be enough people said it that Christmas came to France. Okay, now, I already know this word is probably bringing a lot of thoughts for you. I'm going to sip some water and begin by saying, it's okay. It's okay. The feminist theory is not scary. And we don't have to believe everything it says. And it has a lot of thoughts that some I agree with, some I don't. And I just want to talk about what it is and give you my spicy takes at the end. Okay? But just stick with me. The one sentence summary is the feminist theory of foreign policy is like, yo, nation states are kind of man driven, and they would be radically different if women ran them. So there's a lot of baggage included in that sentence, so let's just talk about why they think that way, again, with us just keeping a cool open mind. They would say, men run everything and war happens. Hashtag not all men, hashtag not always war, but wars happen all the time, and men basically get to decide whether or not we go to war. Am I right, fellas? Am I right, my guys? Isn't that true? And so what therefore we don't actually know whether or not we would be more like it would stand to reason that something would be probably very different about wars and why they happen if women were in charge. Again, whether that's exactly right, I don't want to talk about right now. I like not I don't like this where I'm at right now, this very thin tightrope. But that is step one. Okay, step two. Men don't take death and violence very seriously. Because I think it's kind of easy for us to think about war in like economic sense, in like total deaths. But what about I'm gonna talk about sexual violence real quick. What about the sexual violence of war? What about the trauma of it? What about the ways in which families are permanently altered? What about the ways in which my relationship to the world, to life, to God is changed when you're exposed to war? And again, hashtag not all men, but arguably men get a luxury that they can be emotionally arm's length distance from a lot of those consequences. And it's not that they're immune to it, it's that the average man gets a lot more emotional distance than the average woman from these consequences of war. Um, so there's a very different perspective that is introduced when women are a part of decision making. To which, that would be their final point, is men lack perspective on this. They lack a complete perspective. They don't take death and violence that seriously. They don't understand all the consequences because they get to be away from it. They are rarely the primary recipients of like sexual violence, of mass displacement, of like the people who will be disproportionately hurt the most. And that is partially from a long-standing historic tradition of men having kind of a higher status above women that lets them be kind of independent of them and offload the consequences of child rearing onto women. So that's where, again, hashtag not all men, hashtag not all the time, but it's feminist theorists would say like the world would arguably be more peaceful. And the most famous theorist is J. Ann Tickner, and I want to note that and I'm also then gonna pull on like my personal experience to like explain some of this. I have found in my time when I was working professionally in like foreign policy theory and all that, there's a real desire to talk about war in kind of infantilizing and like literally dick measuring ways. Like the joke from The Dictator where he's like, I need my nuclear rocket to be like bigger and longer and to like and to be more pointy. Um, that actually is like stuff that happens and has been observed. Is like talking about weapons and tanks and all that in the concept of like dick size, of cock, of piss measure, which is fascinating that occurs, and it makes it so, and it reinforces the idea for like feminist theorists that like, hey, what the fuck? That's not cool. A nuke is not a measure of dick. A nuke is a nuke, and we should treat it seriously like that, including like whether we create it. Um, so I'd say the example that's the most salient of this whole thing is the idea of master colonial states. Right? Like the idea that there's, I mean, like going back to what I was talking about earlier with like daddy, I say that as a joke and to make this more entertaining and to lighten the mood a little bit. However, there is like a real idea that like there are nation states that are like feminine and babyish and like small and weak, and that like we are more masculine than. Like, think about people talking about like the Iran right now, of like the US is like putting Iran in its place. Who puts people in their place though? Typically parents, dads, like taking off their belt and reminding their kids their place. Um People love to kind of create that framework of like there's feminine things, there's gay things, and using that derogatory. And while that happens in day-to-day life, that isn't then context wise isolated out from when that person becomes a senator or a member of the House of Representatives. If they hold the idea that gay is feminine and feminine is bad, then they're going to use that type of language to describe nations that they don't like, people they don't like. And it's going to change their perspective and make them view their country as like masculine, tough, big. I mean, Kamala Harris being like, we'll have the most lethal military in the world. Not the biggest, not the strongest. I think lethal is like a uniquely kind of masculine invoking word of lethality is something men have. Now, again, do I fully buy all of that? Yeah, like ish. And this is where I'm actually gonna know, just because I know this is a really controversial one. There is the additional idea of like, haven't there been women heads of states who then went to war? Didn't Queen Victoria do a little war herself? You know, Queen Victoria, didn't she do a little war on the side? Yeah. And feminist theorists would go, one, we're not saying women are incapable of war or like incapable of doing things to protect their country if need be. It's just they might have a different full appreciation of more of the consequences of war and be more hesitant to do it. Their arithmetic, when they say nation A now needs to nerf nation B, they might think about differently about what our power level is and how much it could be reduced by war. Um, and the other big thing is they would say that when there are only a few women in power, there's a framework they propose called the Queen Bee Theory. And the Queen Bee Theory says when women run countries but are surrounded by men, they have to be a tough, mean, fighty queen bee. And that sucks. They should be allowed to they wouldn't have to. They wouldn't have to be so tough and fighty and act masculine if they were allowed to more authentically exist because there was less pressure on them. And awesome, we don't know if that's accurate because there has not been in human history a period of time in which women made up even more than like 10% of the current world leaders or like senior officials within the executive branch of a government. Like of like or of like most governments. So it's something that we very much live in more like theory land for. Like, I know this is all theory land, but like untested theory land. Okay, so we've now talked about a lot of theories. Let's give a real world example. Let's talk about our favorite guy, Papa Saddam Hussein, and the US war to dethrone him, to end his career non-consensually. Why the Iraq War? One might ask. Why did we do that? Why? What the fuck? That's bonkers, really. Um, Realists would say we did the Iraq War because we had really good intelligence. At the time, that said, Iraq's power level is about to become very, very bad. We are Nation A, the US, our power level is over 9,000. It's a big power level. We are big dogs. But the one thing that neuters your power level and makes you a subservient little bitch to any other country is if their power level is any number plus nuke. Any number plus nuke means your power level is irrelevant to whether you can have a say in what goes on. And realists then kind of said Iraq is an unhinged, batshit fucking country that will use that nuke on us. And a nuke is the ultimate nerf. So, to avoid getting nerfed into the ground, we got to nerf them first. We gotta go in there, end it, blow up the nuclear program. Arguably, the nuclear program was the primary, from realists' perspective, that was the main driver. And realists will stop and go. And to be clear, we are talking about from the information that was available at the time. Obviously, everyone was truthful when they talked about the nukes being there, and it was just a little oopsie. It was just a little fuck up. Okay? Can't the CIA fuck up every once in a while? Come on, you all have such high standards. So that's why we did it. And then why did we do the nation building? Because Iraq was going to eventually get back on its feet, and it would be really good if its power level was just defined by us, and it was basically a puppet state of the US, because your power level as a country isn't just your power level, it's also the power level of all of your farm alliances and unique partners and vassal states. So, we need them to be a vassal. Come on. And they would have said a thriving democracy, but then it's one that we imposed and structured and created for them and actually designed very minimally around the actual political realities of the country. We're not going to get all into the weeds like why Iraq failed, but, you know, there's that. Liberals! Okay, we got the liberal perspective. The liberals would say the Iraq War happened because Iraq was an anti-democratic country that was close to gaining power, and it's not that they were unhinged or insane, it's that they were going to threaten the world order that we are trying to construct of global peace. They are an axis of evil. And we can't let an axis of evil form, not a third time. We let it happen once, and it caused Archduke Franz Ferdinand's death, and then tens of millions. We then let it happen twice, and then some awful stuff happened between 1933 and 1945. We cannot allow it to happen thrice. We know what happens when democracies see themselves in a world with too little free market and too little liberty. So we have to go in to prevent the Iraq War, or to prevent Iraq from basically enforcing autocracy in the Mideast, and then dominoes may fall, and now it's the world. We got to do we got to do it for the Kurds, and we got to do it for the religious minorities there. The radicals will say we did it because, come on, there was oil. Come on. It was about money. It was about dollary dues, but not dollary dues for the for the US. Like the government. The government arguably lost so much fucking money on the whole shebang. But the people that decide who runs the government, i.e. the capitalist class, the bourgeois, the corporations, those are the ones that went dick first into Iraq the second it was secure for us to begin expanding our multinational corporations and getting that g-dang motherfucking oil. Come on, it was about protecting the capitalist class, the ruling class. That's what radicals would say. Constructivists We socially constructed that we are a nation that is white. We socially constructed we are a nation that is about freedom. We have the social construction of democracy. We have the social construction of Christianity that defines what we are. We're a Christian nation. We have so many social constructions that create who we are and what we do. And Iraq has many social constructions that are so radically different from ours, we need to let them know who the fuck is in charge. That's where you get the people that like kind of shotgun spread of like, it was about removing hijabs from women. It was about freedom of democracy. It was about it was about 9/11. Even though they didn't do it. It was about therefore like freedom and free markets. It was about revenge. All social constructs that we can choose tomorrow to stop caring about. We can just stop caring about it. And yet we do. We do care about these things. So constructivists talk about that. Feminists. Oh, feminists. Their proposal would be broadly, hey, it was George Bush's ego got in the way. His masculine, the masculine urge that we all have every once in a while to go kill a couple 100,000 Iraqis because our dad didn't get to do it, and that's just wrong. His dad was emasculated by the UN, telling him during the Gulf War to stop, go home, take a breather, and George W. Bush then, when presented with the opportunity after 9/11 and some fabrications from the CIA about nuclear weapons, he used that to basically go, I'm gonna emasculate Iraq now, just like how the UN emasculated my papa. And they would say, arguably, if a more level-headed, less egotistical man, or arguably a woman, was in office, the Iraq War wouldn't have happened. And this is where, again, I want to say, like, I understand that that can be, like, controversial, and I do want to acknowledge the most important counterpoint that exists to that, which is there were many women senators who voted yes on the Iraq War. In fact, all of them did at the time. Here's what I will say: it's that maybe the president wouldn't have been using the bully pulpit to rally the entire nation into basically coercing these senators and members of the House into voting yes. Not that they didn't have free will, but it's just like in the early days of us deciding whether or not to go to Iraq, George Bush's approval rating was 80%. He was basically the God King of America. He could do whatever the fuck he wanted. And he used that power and his influence in the bully pulpit to go, yeah, I'm gonna end Iraq's career. Saddam Hussein is over. And he then fucking did it. So don't let anyone tell you you can't do what you set your mind to. So that is the whole kit and caboodle. That is the introduction to the foreign policy frameworks, and I can't wait to see you all again later to talk about whatever thing is on your mind. If you have topics you want me to discuss, leave them in the comments. If you have things that you want to be the next lecture topic, comment it, and give me a like, subscribe, follow me on twitch.tv. I will be streaming regularly to talk about all of these things in so many different contexts, in so many different ways, and I look forward to building this out with and for all y'all.